Last spring, you probably walked outside and pulled weeds out of your garden. You tossed them in a bag and threw them away without a second thought. You ripped them out of the ground with your bare hands and paid $400 at the pharmacy for what they already do for free. And by the end of this video, you will know every one of them by name and why no pharmacy will ever put them on a shelf. When you get a bacterial infection, the path is often automatic. You call the doctor, you sit in the waiting room, and you might get a prescription. On average, Americans are prescribed antibiotics less than once per year. The assumption behind every single one of those visits is that antibacterial power requires a laboratory, a patent, and a supply chain stretching across continents. That is what we were all taught. That is what most people still believe. But for 4,000 years on every inhabited continent, human beings treated bacterial infections with plants that grew within walking distance of their front doors, not as folk superstition, not as desperate last resorts, as primary medicine, as the first thing a healer reached for when someone showed up with an infected wound or a fever that would not break. And in the last 30 years, modern laboratory research has quietly confirmed what those civilizations understood. Certain plants contain compounds that destroy bacteria through mechanisms almost identical to the ones pharmaceutical antibiotics use. Some of those plants are growing in your yard right now. You have probably mowed over them this month. You may have pulled them out and tossed them in the compost pile last weekend. We spent months going through the research to find the 11 that matter most. 11 plants, 11 different antibacterial mechanisms, thousands of years of documented use across cultures that never communicated with each other and still arrived at the same conclusions. And every single one of them available for free within walking distance of most homes in America and Europe and Asia. Some of them are perennials that come back every year without replanting. Some of them are weeds that grow without anyone's permission. A few of them you can find tomorrow morning without leaving your own property. Here is what no one told you. Every kitchen in America has a spice rack, and almost every spice rack has a small jar of dried oregano sitting somewhere between the garlic powder and the paprika. You shake it onto pizza, you stir it into pasta sauce. You have probably never once thought of it as medicine. But oregano contains a compound called carvacrol, and carvacrol does something that would cost you hundreds of dollars to achieve at a pharmacy. It destroys bacterial cell membranes. It punctures the outer wall of the bacteria and the bacteria dies. Laboratory tests showed that oregano oil inhibited the growth of Staphylococcus aureus at rates comparable to standard pharmaceutical antibiotics. Not similar, comparable. Staphylococcus aureus is the bacteria behind staph infections. It fills hospital wards. It drives thousands of emergency room visits every year across the United States, and the compound that fights it grows in a clay pot on a kitchen windowsill. Greek shepherds knew this 2,000 years ago. When a sheep got a wound in the mountains above the Aegean Sea, the shepherd packed oregano leaves into the cut. When a child scraped a knee in a village on the island of Crete, the grandmother reached for oregano before anything else. The word oregano itself comes from two Greek words, aureus meaning mountain and genos meaning joy, mountain joy. They were not naming a pizza topping. They were naming a medicine that grew wild on every hillside they could see. A bottle of oregano essential oil costs $8 to $15 and lasts for months. Common first-line pharmaceutical antibiotics used to treat standard staph infections are widely available as generics and typically cost less than $20 for a full course. The oregano plant itself is a perennial. Plant it once in zones 5 through 10 and it comes back every single year. Free medicine every spring. No prescription required. But oregano was only the beginning, because right next to it on that same spice rack, there is another herb that contains the exact same antibacterial compound, plus a second one that oregano does not have. That herb is thyme, and thyme carries both thymol and carvacrol, two antibacterial mechanisms in a single plant. Research tested thyme essential oil against 120 different strains of bacteria collected from patients with infections of the mouth, the lungs, and the urinary tract. It was effective across the board. Here's the part that should make you pause. One of the active ingredients in Listerine mouthwash is thymol, a compound structurally identical to the one found in thyme, though modern commercial manufacturing primarily relies on synthetic thymol. They built a brand around it. They have been selling it back to you for 150 years. The plant it came from costs $3 at any garden nursery in the country. Ancient Egyptians understood this power long before any corporation did. They used thyme in their embalming process because they recognized that it stopped bacterial decomposition of human tissue. They did not have microscopes. They did not have laboratories. They watched what happened when thyme touched dead flesh, and they drew the correct conclusion. Oregano and thyme work through their essential oils, but there is a third plant sitting in almost every kitchen in the world that fights bacteria through an entirely different mechanism. And this one the military used as battlefield medicine when the real antibiotics ran out. You know garlic. You cook with it. You buy it by the bulb at any grocery store for less than $1. But garlic contains a sulfur compound called allicin that is released the instant you crush a clove. That sharp smell when you press garlic under a knife is allicin entering the air, and allicin attacks bacteria differently than oregano or thyme. It disrupts the enzymes bacteria need to survive. This means that bacteria resistant to one of these plants may still fall to another. 3 kitchen herbs, 3 different kill mechanisms. Louis Pasteur, the French chemist who discovered that germs cause disease, documented garlic as an antibacterial agent in 1858. That was more than 160 years ago, during World War I and again during World War II, when antibiotic supplies ran dangerously low on the front lines. Field medics in multiple armies packed crushed garlic directly into soldiers' wounds. The Soviet military used garlic so extensively during World War II that it earned a nickname across the entire Red Army. They called it Russian penicillin. Soldiers carried cloves of garlic in their pockets the way American soldiers carried sulfa powder. But the modern research is what should really stop you in your tracks. Laboratory studies have shown that isolated concentrated allicin extracts can inhibit MRSA in petri dishes. However, consuming or topically applying whole garlic does not deliver a stable or high enough concentration of allicin to treat a systemic or deep tissue MRSA infection in humans. 3 plants from your kitchen, 3 different ways to kill bacteria. Exposed to the open air for thousands of years of human history, tested in modern laboratories and confirmed, and you have probably had all 3 in your home for decades without knowing any of this. So the question changes, if the science is this clear, if the history stretches back this far, if the results have been confirmed again and again, then why has no doctor ever mentioned it? Why has no pharmacy ever stocked oregano oil next to the amoxicillin? Why has no insurance company ever covered a $3 thyme plant as a preventive measure? The answer is not complicated, it is just uncomfortable. The global antibiotic market generates $42 billion every single year. In the United States alone, pharmacies fill over 236 million antibiotic prescriptions annually. Every one of those prescriptions passes through a system that includes a pharmaceutical manufacturer, a distributor, a pharmacy chain, and an insurance company. Every link in that chain takes a cut. Every link in that chain depends on you walking through the door and paying. Picture the fluorescent lights of your local pharmacy. Picture the white paper bag stapled shut with the receipt. Picture the line of people waiting to hand over their credit cards. That is a $42 billion system operating exactly as designed. A plant that grows itself in a backyard cannot generate a prescription. A compound that exists freely in nature cannot be patented. An herb that self-seeds every spring cannot create repeat customers. Research funding in the Western world flows toward patentable outcomes because patentable outcomes generate returns for investors. Universities pursue grants from pharmaceutical sponsors because pharmaceutical sponsors have the money. The plants that work for free receive almost no funding, not because they do not work, because they do not profit anyone. Tens of thousands of studies exist on synthetic antibiotics. A tiny fraction of that number exist on plant-based antimicrobials. That ratio does not reflect effectiveness, it reflects economics. Meanwhile, antibiotic resistance is now killing over 1 million people globally per year. The World Health Organization has called it a top 10 global health threat. The system that ignored these plants is now struggling to keep its own drugs working. But the pharmaceutical industry's disinterest does not change what grows in your yard. There are 8 more plants on this list, and the next one was used by Native Americans for more conditions than any other plant in their entire healing tradition. Echinacea grows wild across the prairies of the central United States. Purple cone flower is what most people call it when they see it growing along roadsides in Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas. Its bright purple petals and raised orange center make it one of the most recognizable wildflowers on the Great Plains. For more than 400 years before any Europeans set foot on this continent, the Cheyenne used echinacea for sore throats. The Lakota used it for pain and infection. The Pawnee used it for headaches. No other single plant in the entire Native American pharmacopoeia was used for as many different conditions. Healers passed this knowledge down through oral tradition across generations. It was considered one of the most important medicines a community could possess. European settlers ignored it for centuries. Then in 1989, Germany's Commission E, which functions as the German equivalent of the FDA for herbal products, officially approved echinacea for treating upper respiratory infections. The supplement industry suddenly paid attention. Within 2 decades, echinacea became a $1.3 billion global market. Capsules, tinctures, teas, gummies, all sold back to consumers at premium prices. The indigenous peoples who discovered and refined this knowledge over 4 centuries received nothing from that market. But echinacea does not just boost immune response the way most supplement labels claim. Research has shown that it contains compounds that directly inhibit bacterial growth, particularly the bacteria that cause respiratory infections. The plant that the Lakota reached for when someone could not breathe turns out to attack the bacteria responsible through mechanisms that modern instruments can now measure and confirm. The next plant has an even longer record, 4,000 years longer. In India, in villages and cities and rural clinics stretching from Kerala to Kashmir, when someone gets a cut or a scrape, the first thing that often comes out is not a bandage. It is a bright orange powder. Turmeric. Ayurvedic medicine has documented turmeric as a wound treatment since 2000 BCE. Indian mothers still apply turmeric paste to their children's scrapes before reaching for anything else. 4 billion people live in cultures that treat turmeric as medicine first and a cooking spice second. Western nutrition classified it the other way around. Turmeric contains curcumin, and curcumin does something that even many pharmaceutical antibiotics struggle to accomplish. It disrupts bacterial biofilms. Biofilms are the protective shields that bacteria build around themselves when they colonize a wound or an organ. They are the reason some infections become chronic. They are the reason certain antibiotics fail even when the bacteria should be vulnerable. The bacteria hide behind the biofilm and the drug cannot reach them. Curcumin breaks those shields open. It strips the armor off the bacteria and exposes them. Turmeric root costs roughly $2 per pound at any Asian grocery store in America. It grows outdoors in zones 8 through 11 and indoors in a pot anywhere else. The pharmaceutical industry has spent billions trying to develop synthetic biofilm disruptors. The answer has been sitting in the spice aisle for 4,000 years. Now, here is where the pattern gets personal. There is a plant called golden seal that grows wild in the forests of eastern North America. From the Appalachian Mountains down through Ohio and into the river valleys of Kentucky and Tennessee, golden seal has been part of the forest floor for as long as anyone can remember. The Cherokee used it for skin infections. The Iroquois used it for digestive illness and eye inflammation. and inside this plant, there is an alkaloid called berberine. If you walk into any health food store right now and look at the supplement aisle, you will find berberine capsules selling for $30 to $60 a bottle. Berberine has been shown effective against Streptococcus, E. coli, and Pseudomonas. The supplement industry extracted this compound from golden seal, packaged it in capsules, and put it on shelves with a barcode and a markup. The plant itself grows wild in forests you can walk into for free. But here is the bitter part. European settlers learned about golden seal from indigenous peoples and then harvested it so aggressively that golden seal is now listed as endangered or threatened in multiple states. They took the knowledge, they took the plant, and now they sell the molecule back to you in a bottle. The label will not mention golden seal. The label will not mention the Cherokee. The supply chain exists specifically to disconnect you from the source. The next plant carries a name that sounds like mythology, Achillea millefolium, named after Achilles. The legend says the Greek hero packed this plant into the wounds of his soldiers during the siege of Troy. Most legends exaggerate. This one understated. Yarrow contains over 120 identified bioactive compounds. Modern wound care science is still trying to replicate in a lab what this single plant does naturally in a meadow. During World War I, when medical supplies ran low in the trenches of France and Belgium, field medics turned to yarrow as a wound treatment. They crushed the leaves, packed them into open wounds, and watched infections slow down and stop. In Sweden and Norway, traditional healers had been using yarrow poultices for wound infections for over 800 years. The Swedish common name for yarrow translates loosely to field surgeon's herb. They named the plant after what it did, and today yarrow is classified as a common weed across most of the United States. It grows in ditches along Route 66. It grows in the median strips of suburban highways. It grows in unmowed fields and neglected vacant lots from Maine to California. It is drought-tolerant, self-spreading, and almost impossible to kill. A plant that treated battlefield infections in the trenches of World War I grows in the crack of your sidewalk, and you have been stepping over it your entire life. 7 plants so far. 7 different mechanisms for killing bacteria, thousands of years of use across dozens of cultures, and we are not finished. The final 4 include something that is not even technically a plant, a berry that Hippocrates himself called his medicine chest, and a weed so common you have certainly stepped on it this week. Rosemary is an evergreen shrub. Millions of American homes have one growing in the front yard or beside the porch as a decorative landscape plant. Walk through any neighborhood in Southern California or Texas or the Carolinas, and you will see rosemary hedges lining driveways and bordering garden beds. It smells pleasant. It looks nice trimmed into a shape. Most homeowners think of it as ornamental and nothing more. But during the Black Death in medieval Europe, when plague swept through cities from London to Florence and killed 1/3 of the population, Europeans burned rosemary inside hospital wards and sick rooms. There's a famous legend about a group of grave robbers during the plague who managed to loot the dead without getting sick. Their secret was said to be a vinegar infused with rosemary and several other herbs. Historians call it 4 thieves' vinegar. They did not understand the chemistry, they understood the result. Rosemary contains 2 compounds called carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid. Both have confirmed antibacterial activity against Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus subtilis, and E. coli. You may have a rosemary bush in your front yard right now that you have been trimming for years and never once considered as medicine. It is not decoration. It is an antibacterial shrub disguised as landscaping. Now, for something most people have never heard of, if you have ever hiked through a damp forest in the Pacific Northwest, or through the mountains of Appalachia, or through the woodlands of Northern Europe, you have seen it. It looks like pale green hair hanging from tree branches. Most hikers assume it is dead moss or some kind of fungal growth. It is neither. It is called usnea, and it is a lichen. a symbiotic organism that is part fungus and part algae, and it produces one of the most potent antibacterial compounds found anywhere in nature. The compound is called usnic acid. Research has documented usnic acid as effective against Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. That last one is the bacterium that causes tuberculosis, a disease that still kills over 1 million people worldwide every single year. Ancient Greek healers used usnia, ancient Chinese healers used usnia, ancient Egyptian healers used usnia. 3 civilizations on 3 different continents, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all arrived at the same conclusion about the same organism independently. Here is what should infuriate you. Modern European pharmaceutical companies have filed patents on usnic acid formulations for use in wound dressings and antibacterial products. They patented a compound produced by a lichen that hangs free on trees in public forests that anyone can walk into. The organism manufactures usnic acid at no cost. It has been doing so for millions of years. The corporation charges you for the privilege of accessing what the forest already provides. Usnia is not cultivated, it is foraged. Look for it on dead or fallen branches in humid forests. It is abundant where it grows. A single afternoon of careful gathering provides enough material for a year of tinctures and wound preparations. Hippocrates lived in ancient Greece around 400 BCE. He is called the father of Western medicine. Every doctor who has ever taken the Hippocratic Oath is invoking his name and his principles. And Hippocrates called the elder tree his medicine chest. That was 2,400 years ago. For 24 centuries after that, European healers used elderberry as a frontline treatment for infections and fevers. Elderberry was not one remedy among many. It was the first thing reached for. Modern research has confirmed what Hippocrates observed. Elderberry contains compounds that show antiviral activity in laboratory settings. While some clinical trials suggest elderberry supplements may help reduce the duration and severity of common cold and flu symptoms, the clinical evidence remains mixed, and it does not cure viral infections. The evidence is strong enough that elderberry supplements now fill an entire section of most pharmacies and health food stores. By 2023, the elderberry supplement market hit $280 million. Gummies, syrups, capsules, lozenges, every form you can imagine, all of it extracted and processed and packaged from a berry that grows wild on roadsides, in hedgerows, and along riverbanks across North America and Europe. Drive through rural England or the back roads of upstate New York or the river valleys of Oregon in late summer, and you will see elder trees heavy with clusters of dark purple berries. Nobody planted them. Nobody tends them. Elder trees produce berries every single year without fertilizer, without irrigation, without any human input at all. The tree asks nothing. The supplement industry intercepts the fruit and sells it back to you in a plastic bottle with a barcode. And now the last one. This is the plant that brings everything full circle. This is the one that should change the way you look at your own lawn. It is not the banana. The word plantain refers to 2 completely different plants, and most people only know the tropical fruit. But Plantago major is something else entirely. It is a flat, low-growing weed with ribbed oval leaves that press close to the ground. It grows in every lawn. It grows in every sidewalk crack. It grows in every neglected garden bed and every patch of compacted soil in the temperate world. You have stepped on it this week. You have mowed over it this month. You may have sprayed it with herbicide last spring trying to get rid of it. Plantain weed contains 2 compounds called curcumin and allantoin. Both have documented antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. When applied to cuts, scrapes, insect bites, and minor skin infections, plantain draws out infection and accelerates tissue repair. Herbalists call it nature's band-aid, and for once, that is not an exaggeration. The Anglo-Saxons listed plantain among the 9 sacred herbs over 1,000 years ago. Shakespeare referenced it as a wound healer in his plays. Indigenous peoples across North America, South America, and Asia all discovered plantain's antimicrobial properties completely independently of each other. When three separate continents arrive at the same conclusion about the same plant without any communication between them, that is not folklore. That is not coincidence. That is consensus built across thousands of years of human observation. And this is the plant that makes the whole story personal. Not an exotic herb you need to order online, not a supplement you need to buy from a health food store, not a tincture you need to brew from foraged lichen. The weed under your feet, the one growing between the bricks of your patio, the one you have been paying money to poison with weed killer while simultaneously paying a pharmacy for antibacterial ointment to put on your skin. The answer was pushing through the concrete of your own driveway, and you were spraying it with chemicals to make it go away. 11 plants: oregano, thyme, garlic, echinacea, turmeric, golden seal, yarrow, rosemary, usnia, elderberry, plantain, 11 different ways to fight bacteria, thousands of years of documented use across dozens of cultures, from ancient Greece to feudal Japan to the Cherokee Nation to villages in Kerala, every single one of them confirmed by modern science, every single one of them available for free or close to it. The pharmaceutical industry generates $42 billion a year selling antibiotics. These 11 plants generate zero revenue for that industry. That is the reason you were never taught their names in school. That is the reason no doctor has ever scribbled oregano oil on a prescription pad. That is the reason no television commercial has ever told you to go outside and pick the plantain growing next to your mailbox. You cannot bill for something that grows itself, but the plants do not care about billing codes. They do not care about revenue streams or quarterly earnings or shareholder value. They care about one thing: growing. They have been growing for thousands of years before the first pharmacy ever opened its doors. They grew through wars and plagues and famines and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Oregano still climbs the hillsides above the Aegean, yarrow still fills the meadows of Scandinavia, plantain still pushes through concrete in every city in the world. They are growing right now while you are watching this, and they will keep growing long after the last prescription is filled. You know their names now, you know what they do, you know where they grow, and you know why nobody told you before today. That knowledge, once it is in your hands, cannot be taken back. No corporation can unlearn it for you. No system can make you forget what you just heard. The information is yours now, and the plants are waiting. They always have been.